All right, we're live.
Thank you, Connor. Good morning. Today is Thursday, April 17th, 2025. This is an adjudicatory hearing before the Massachusetts Gaming Commission relative to the alleged noncompliance of Penn Sports Interactive LLC doing business as ESPN Bet with General Law, Chapter 23N, Section 4C, 205 CMR 256.011, 205 CMR 256.021, 205 CMR 256.041, 205 CMR 256.046A, and 205 CMR 256.046C, and 205 CMR 256.046D. I will refer to Penn Sports Interactive LLC as PSI. My name is Jordan Maynard, and I'm serving as chair of the commission. I'm joined today by my colleagues, Commissioners Eileen O'Brien, Brad Hill, Nikisha Skinner, and Paul Broder. The entire commission will preside over the hearing and decision of this matter. This hearing will be conducted in accordance with 205 CMR 101.01, the Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Sections 10 and 11, and 801 CMR 1.02, the Informal Fair Hearing Rules. This hearing is being conducted via remote collaboration technology. I would like to explain the process that will govern this proceeding. First, a notice of hearing was provided to PSI in advance of today's hearing. It identified the alleged noncompliance incidents that will be the focus of the Commission's attention at this hearing and the relevant statutes and regulations. A pre-hearing conference was also conducted. Pursuant to Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 23N, Sections 4 and 16, and 205 CMR 232, the Commission may hold this adjudicatory hearing, and at the conclusion of the hearing may decide to issue a civil administrative penalty, impose conditions on PSI's license, suspend PSI's license, revoke PSI's license, reprimand PSI, and or assess a fine on PSI. I see that a number of lawyers are present here today on behalf of the parties. I will ask that you each please identify yourself and advise the Commission as to whom you represent.
Good morning, Chair. Zach Mercer for the IAB. Also present from the IAB on the call today would be Chief Enforcement Counsel Kathleen Kramer and IAB Director Caitlin Monahan.
Thank you, Counselor.
Morning, Chair, Commissioners, Chris Soriano on behalf of PSI.
Thank you, Counselor. At the conclusion of my opening comments, this proceeding will commence with opening statements. Both the IEB and the licensee will be offered an opportunity to make a statement outlining the case they intend to present. Either may decline to make an opening statement, or in the case of the licensee, defer until the beginning of its case. After opening statements, we will move to the presentation of the evidence in this matter. First, the IEB will be called upon to present its findings as described in the investigative report and any other applicable evidence. Any commissioner may ask a question of any witness being presented at any point during or following the presentation. At the conclusion of the testimony of each witness, the licensee, through its counsel, will be afforded an opportunity to cross-examine the witness as to any matter addressed in the investigative report or to which he or she testified. At the conclusion of the IEB's presentation, the licensee will be given an opportunity to present its case. The licensee may call any witness or present any evidence it desires. At the conclusion of the direct testimony of each witness, counsel for the IEB will be provided an opportunity to conduct a cross-examination of the witness. As before, any commissioner may ask any question of any witness at any time during an examination or at the conclusion of the examination. We will allow very limited redirect and recross of a witness. Either party may raise any objection it desires at any time. However, the basis for all objections must be clearly stated. Finally, at the conclusion of all the evidence, the IEB and the licensee will each be provided an opportunity to make a closing statement, summing up the respective presentations. Before we begin, I understand that there are pre-marked exhibits that have been prepared in advance of this hearing. Those exhibits are identified on the exhibit list that has been circulated. They are as follows. Number 1, a video clip from ESPN College Game Day, March 24th, 2024. X.com post by Reese Davis, at Reese Davis, March 24th, 2024. Email notification from attorney Chris Soriano, March 25th, 2024. A video clips from the ESPN's Pat McAfee Show, March 25th, 2024, parts 1 and 2. IB interview of attorney Chris Soriano, August 6, 2024. Penn ESPN's Sportsbook Agreement, August 8, 2023. Penn ESPN Bet Content Guidance, October 19, 2023. Penn Correspondence with IEB, October 28, 2024. Penn Correspondence with IEB, March 17, 2025. ESPN Sports Betting Employee Policies, July 2024. The IEB's Noncompliance Investigation Report, April 2nd, 2024. And finally, a notice of hearing. Are there any objections to exhibits 1 through 12 being marked and entered into evidence?
No objection from the IAB, though I do have one note I'd like to make the commissioners aware of. There are 2 minor typographical errors in the report as presented to the commission, which is previously marked, as Chair just stated, as Exhibit 11. On page 1, PPC is the holder of a Category 1 Category 1 sports wagering license, not 2. And then on page 8, setting the date of Mr. Soriano's notification, the date reads March 25th, 2025, whereas that should read March 25th, 2024. Just wanted to make the chair and commissioners aware of that. But otherwise, no objections. Thank you.
All right, thank you. That is noted.
Thank
Mr.
you, Chair.
Soriano?
Thank you, Chair. No objections to the exhibits. We stipulate to their admissibility and note and appreciate Councilor Mercer's correction on the record.
Thank you, Council. Those exhibits shall be admitted into evidence. In order to maintain a clean record, I ask that documents are referred to by exhibit number. Thank you, Councilor Mercer, for doing that already. At this point, I will ask if I have an error in my notes. So see, everyone can do it.
Apologies, Chair. That should read PSI. I just caught that myself. So
I'm taking care of it.
My mistake.
At this point, I'll ask if PSI would like to stipulate to exhibit 11, which is the IEB report dated April 2nd, 2025.
Yes, Chair. Thank you. We do stipulate to the facts as laid out in the IEB's report.
Thank you, Councilor. If any party would like to have any additional documents entered into evidence during the course of the hearing, I would ask that they be properly introduced and marked. The Commission anticipates that its inquiry at this proceeding will be limited to the matters addressed in the investigative report and contained in the notice of hearing. In the event that a line of questioning conducted by the Commission moves into an area that has not been included in the report or notice, but that is material to the final determination of this matter, the licensee may request a recess in the proceeding in order to review the issue. A proceeding of this nature necessarily requires the consideration of a wide variety of information that takes several forms. In this case, some of the information and documentation may include commercially sensitive information. The public discussion of such information may place an entity at competitive disadvantage if such information were to be publicly discussed. For the Commission to be able to execute its legal obligations effectively and diligently prior to making a final finding, it must be at liberty to fully inquire relative to any of these sensitive matters without compromising the individuals or entities involved. To do otherwise would be, at a minimum, unfair and potentially unlawful. Accordingly, my colleagues and I may elect to exercise the discretion afforded in accordance with 205 CMR 101.01, paragraph 7, to close this proceeding to the public to fully address certain matters. Under this same regulatory section, PSI may request that portions of this hearing be closed to the public as well, and any such request will be considered in turn. I will add that no final decision will be made at the conclusion of the public portion of the hearing. Instead, at the conclusion of the proceeding, the Commission will privately deliberate and ultimately issue a written decision. If at any point during the commission's deliberations, it determines that additional testimonial or documentary evidence is desirable, it reserves the right to ask for such evidence prior to a final decision being made. We will now swear all the witnesses in. Anyone who will be testifying at this proceeding, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you will provide before the commission at the proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do.
Thank you. All have responded in the affirmative. Before we begin, does PSI have any preliminary issues or objections, Mr. Soriano?
None, Chair. We're ready to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I will ask IEB to make its opening statement if it desires to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning once again, Chair and Commissioners. This is a matter involving Category 3 sports wagering operator Penn Sports Interactive, doing business as ESPN Bet. For the purposes of this hearing, I'll be referring to the operator and its collective entities by the parent company's name, Penn. As the Commission is aware, as of November 23rd, 2023, Penn has been in a marketing relationship with sports media company ESPN. That relationship, amongst other things, resulted in Penn becoming the official odds supplier to ESPN, and the branding of ESPN sports wagering content became ESPN Bet. The incident in question involves a statement made by ESPN host Reese Davis on the March 24th, 2024 edition of ESPN's College Game Day television program. In the relevant segment, ESPN sports wagering analyst Aaron Dolan presented wagering picks for NCAA men's basketball games. Following Ms. Dolan's presentation, Mr. Davis responded to her picks by saying, "You know what? Some would call this wagering, gambling. I think the way you've sold this, I think what it is risk-free investment. That's the way to look at it." That's the statement which brings us before the Commission today. 205 CMR 232.01 allows the Commission to assign the Bureau to investigate any suspected or asserted violation of 23N and 205 CMR. The IEB initially briefed the Commission on this matter on June 6, 2024, at which point the Commission elected to move this matter to an adjudicatory hearing with the IEB serving as a party. Following the Commission's decision, the IEB conducted an investigation beginning with a review of the relevant statutory and regulatory authority. Pursuant to General Laws Chapter 23N, Section 4C2A, the Commission was required to promulgate regulations to prohibit advertising or branding in a manner that is deceptive, false, misleading, or untrue, or intends to deceive or create a misleading impression, whether directly or by ambiguity or omission. The regulations relevant to that topic area are found in 205 CMR 256 and are implicated today. 205 CMR 256.01 states that each sports wagering operator shall be responsible for the content and any conduct of any and all sports wagering advertising, marketing, or branding done on its behalf or to its benefit, whether conducted by the sports wagering operator, an employee or agent of the sports wagering operator, or an affiliated entity or a third party pursuant to a contract or any other agreement for consideration or remuneration, regardless of whether such party is also required to be licensed or registered as a sports wagering vendor or non-sports wagering vendor. This is the regulation that ties statements made by individuals on ESPN to the regulatory responsibilities of Penn as a sports wagering operator. Additionally, 205 CMR 256.041 states that no sports wagering operator shall allow, conduct, or participate in any unfair or deceptive advertising, marketing, or branding for sports wagering. And finally, 205 CMR 256.046C and D more specifically state that no advertising, marketing, branding, and other promotional materials published, aired, displayed, disseminated, or distributed by or on behalf of a sports wagering operator shall imply or promote sports wagering as free of risk in general or in connection with any particular promotion or sports wagering offers, and D, sports wagering depict sports wagering as free, cost-free, free of risk if the player needs to incur any loss or risk their own money to use or withdraw winnings from the wager. As you will see in the video presented as part of the IEB's case, Mr. Davis's statement is a clear violation of these regulations. Understanding that there is no dispute regarding the authenticity of Mr. Davis's statement, the IEB conducted an investigation that focused on both the incident itself, its immediate aftermath, Penn's policies and relationship with ESPN, and any remediation conducted. To accomplish this, the IEB interviewed Penn Chief Compliance Officer Chris Soriano, reviewed portions of the sportsbook agreement between Penn and ESPN, requested and reviewed additional information, reviewed Penn policies, focusing on the policy relevant to content guidelines, and reviewed additional video clips and statements by Mr. Davis addressing the incident. In summary, the IAB's intention today is to present a broader picture of the noncompliance incident, and through today's testimony and the previously submitted exhibits, provide the commission with information that may be of assistance in determining possible discipline or remediation. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. I will now ask Mr. Soriano if he has an opening statement.
Thank you, Chair. I will defer until the conclusion of the IAB's presentation.
Thank you, Counselor. I'll ask the IAB to move forward with calling any witnesses it intends to call.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The IAB would call Kevin Murphy.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Murphy. Could you please state your name for the record?
Kevin Murphy.
And sir, what do you currently do for work?
I'm a civilian investigator for the Massachusetts Gaming Commission.
And could you describe your past professional experience prior to taking on that role?
I'm a retired member, sworn member of the Massachusetts State Police, where I worked 26 years. 8 of those years with the Middlesex District Attorney's Office as a homicide investigator. And then I moved to the Massachusetts Gaming Commission as a state police investigator. I retired in July of 2022 and then returned to the Mass Gaming Commission in the role of the civilian investigator in October of 2022.
And in the course of your duties as a civilian investigator, were you asked to participate in an investigation involving Penn Sports Interactive doing business as ESPN Bet?
Yes.
And ESPN being a sports media company, correct?
Correct.
And did that investigation center around a remark made by host Reese Davis on an episode of ESPN College Game Day?
Yes, it did.
And did your investigation start with a review of that relevant remark?
Yes.
All right. And sir, I'm going to show you, with permission of the chair, if I could screen share, I'm going to show you what's been previously marked as Exhibit 1. Just a moment, please. And bear with me, working through the sound of projecting this. If there is no sound, immediately let me know, and I will change that for you.
Please proceed.
Thank you.
How many different ways you could play a game?
Can you hear that, Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
The spread, you can look at player props, the total, but we're going to get, again, a little spicy here. This is going to be a sweat. I wish I could give you a ton of research of why this is going to hit under, but when we look at UConn, they like to slow down the tempo. The same thing goes for Northwestern. If they want to stay in this game, they're going to have to slow down UConn's offense. And we like to go off what we just saw. So for Northwestern, for example, they just put up 77 points on Florida Atlantic, but you have to remember, 19 of those points, they came in overtime. So I expect this to be a slow game all around, good defenses on both sides of the ball. And so if you look at a team total, although it seems low at 60.5, I'm going to go under there.
You know what? Some would call this wagering, gambling. I think the way you've sold this. No, I think what it is risk-free investment. That's the way to look at it.
Aaron, positive way.
Aaron Dolan from ESPN Bet with the best.
How many different ways?
Sir, do you recognize that clip?
Yes, I do.
All right. Is that the clip that you viewed in the course of your investigation?
Yes.
And where did that clip originate?
On March 24th, 2024, on an edition of ESPN College Game Day.
Okay. And were you able to identify the parties that are present in that video?
Yes, ESPN sports wagering analyst Aaron Dolan and host Reese Davis.
And fair to say that in the context of that clip, Ms. Dolan made wagering picks on NCAA men's basketball. And in response to those picks, Mr. Davis has a response. Is that correct?
Yes.
Could you summarize what that response was for the commissioners, please?
Mr. Davis referred to Ms. Dolan's wagering picks on the NCAA men's basketball as a risk-free investment.
And is this the statement that the incident of noncompliance that this investigation centered around?
Yes.
And after reviewing the segment, did you review any additional statements made by Mr. Davis?
Yes, 2 other statements. And a statement on X, where he posted something the same day, and then the following day on March 25th, 2024, an appearance on the Pat McAfee show.
Now, once again, sir, I'm going to share my screen and show you what has been previously marked as Exhibit 2. Sir, do you recognize the post that is depicted on the screen right now?
Yes,
And what do you recognize that to be?
that's the X post that Reese Davis posted the same day as the show.
And for the purposes of the record, could you read that statement aloud? It spans over 2 posts on the screen.
Sure. It states, during a segment this morning on College Game Day, due to ESPN Bet picks hitting yesterday, I joked the advice was more like risk-free investing. As we all know, such a thing does not exist. Obviously, there are risks. Though I am not a gambler, I strongly encourage those who do partake do so with prudence, care, caution, fiscal and personal responsibility, and never overextend. Sports are unpredictable. Wagering is tricky. So let's agree to manage monetary risks appropriately. I'm sure most recognize my comments as tongue-in-cheek, just to clarify.
Thank you. And sir, did you learn when Penn notified the commission of this incident?
Yes, the following day on March 25th, Attorney Soriano submitted a notification email to the MGC.
And has that notification previously been marked as Exhibit 3?
Yes, it has.
And sir, did you learn of any additional statements made by Mr. Davis on March 25th, 2024, further addressing the statement that he made on ESPN College Game Day?
Yes, when he appeared on the Pat McAfee show on 3/25/24.
Now, sir, once again, I'm going to share my screen with you, and I'm going to show you 2 parts of a video that's been previously marked as Exhibit 4. If you'll bear with me, I will stop at the conclusion of the first part and begin the second part for the purposes of the record, but I will start that now.
Speaking of the gambling world, it came up this weekend on ESPN when an ESPN pundit named EKD, Aaron K. Dolan, laid out a pitch for why she thinks UConn will hold Northwestern to under 60.5 points. In an attempt to compliment EKD on the way she laid out the said pick, Reese Davis said something that set the world ablaze, because in the modern world of gambling, with regulations and how you're marketing and promoting things, there's some things you can't guarantee, like something is a risk-free investment, when everybody knows the risks of gambling, and everybody should know that if you're betting it, you should understand that you're going to lose it. But people on TV who can influence and change the way people think, you have to let people know that without telling them, hey, this is just a good idea, you should do it. The bet did win. So that's a big piece of the story that is going to be forgotten. But joining us now is a man who had to come out and say, I'm sorry, I misspoke. There was no ill intent involved. I was just trying to compliment EKD for the incredible job that she had done. It was not, that was obviously a joke if you watched it, but I understand the severity of it all. Ladies and gentlemen, friend of the program, family of the program, Reese Davis.
Hey,
Reese, did I lay that out properly? I don't know if you were listening there. Did I lay it out properly?
I was listening, except for the one thing I'll say, and look, I don't want to make this a big deal. It was just a small segment. It was a throwaway line. Any reasonable person knew that I was being facetious, because there's nothing in life that comes without risk, especially gambling. That's obvious for anyone who knows anything. But I didn't apologize.
Okay. I apologize for saying you.
I clarified, and I don't think anybody thought that we were really handing out free money, but maybe it's a better course of action in the future. I'll go with the old David Letterman lines of, this is an exhibition, not a competition. So please, no wagering. Maybe that's the way we'll go from now on.
For the purposes of the record, moving on to Exhibit 4, Part 2.
That is the world, though. It's all behind, because each state has different rules, regulators, everything like that. And we were at the ground floor of this with FanDuel as it was kind of entering, and what you're allowed to say, what you're not allowed to say. And there's some of these regulators that are going to hold everything against you. Like, hey, can't do this, because they're scared to death that a younger generation is going to get hooked and spiral out of control, yada, yada, yada. So the way you phrase things is a massive piece of a lot of the conversations about how you can market, how you can advertise. And although that wasn't, I don't think, an ESPN Bet advertisement. It is.
It was not,
Okay.
right.
So it is something,
Yeah.
though, that like they take that very seriously because they do believe there's a chance you could influence somebody. Now, to your point, if somebody listened to that, I think they would have very much understood, like, okay, he was clearly talking to what she said as opposed to what he thinks. So I think it's a good learning experience for everybody that's on TV talking about gambling now at this standpoint of the thing, because it's not about, it's like the regulators, what they can use against you and what they can't is kind of the big deal.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I wasn't thinking about all of that. What we were really talking about is I asked, I think in the break, we had the other guy, Joe Fortenbaugh, on the day before. And I said, how did those picks that he did yesterday, how did they do? And they said, well, they were both right. They both won. And I was like, oh, wow, hey, 2-0. And I was, joking with Aaron, say, hey, you've got a little bit of a high bar to live up to there because he hit both of his. What do you got for us? And, it was.
Hey, the bet hit. People
I
forget.
was being, both of them, if you want to be precise. I was just being facetious. Everybody should understand that it wasn't an endorsement or an advertisement or any of that stuff for gambling. Whatever you do, whether it's gambling or drinking or investing or pursuing your career, let's all do so wisely and responsibly and act like grown people, So,
Thank you, Reese.
anyway, yeah.
Reese, I didn't like a lot of the things that were being said because, like, any human that's ever met Reese knows he's like the nicest human on earth. Like, there's going to be zero ill intent out of Reese Davis's mouth at any time. So the way that was kind of clipped and framed and placed, certainly somebody trying to get you. But we want to let you know, as we move forward, we all learn from it, and we keep it moving. We appreciate you, Reese.
That. All right.
That is the world.
Sir, you recognize that video clip?
Yes, sir.
And what do you recognize that to be?
That's Mr. Davis speaking of his comment of a risk-free investment on the day before. It was an attempt to explain that he was just being facetious in his words and that it was a comment, not an endorsement or an advertisement.
Thank you. Now, following the review of this self-reported violation by Penn and the incident itself, did the investigators seek additional information to better understand this incident?
Yes.
And could you explain some of the methods of the investigation by the IAB?
We reviewed the open source media that we just looked at, the two exhibits. We interviewed Attorney Soriano. We requested some additional information and reviewed some policies and reviewed portions of the sportsbook agreement between ESPN and Penn Entertainment.
And let's start there with the ESPN and Penn agreement. During the investigation, did you review portions of the Penn ESPN sportsbook agreement, which has been previously marked as Exhibit 6?
Yes.
Okay. And this is an agreement that was, for the record, executed on August 8th, 2023.
Correct.
Who are the parties to this agreement?
It's Penn, ESPN Inc., and ESPN Enterprises.
And are any of those two ESPN entities licensed by the MGC?
Yes, ESPN Enterprises is a Massachusetts sports wagering registrant.
And could you detail some of the central portions of this agreement that were relevant to this investigation?
Sure. For the details to note of the agreement, Penn rebranded its sportsbook as ESPN Bet. Penn became an official odds supplier of ESPN. Penn continued to oversee daily operations of the sportsbook, and ESPN provides promotional services for the sportsbook. This involves the rebranding of ESPN sports wagering content as it is consistent with ESPN Bet.
And were you able to review any materials relevant to Penn's content guidance in its relationship with ESPN?
Yes, I reviewed Penn's sports wagering content policy itself.
Now, sir, I'm going to show you what's been previously marked as Exhibit 7. Do you see the document that is on the screen right now?
Yes.
And sir, what do you recognize that to be?
That's the ESPN Bet content guidance.
And that was, dated October 19th, 2023?
Yes, it is.
And specific to this investigation, are there any policies directed toward language implying guarantees in this policy?
Yes, there's two different policies that we looked at in that in that content.
And just for the purposes of the record, Exhibit 7 is a 2-page document, and I'm going to page 2 to direct you. Do you see those 2 areas of relevance on page 2 of this document?
Yes, I do.
Could you point them out and read them for the commissioners, please?
Yeah, the first is the avoiding using the avoiding using free or risk-free, as this is generally prohibited terminology, as is the term can't lose. And the second prohibited content guideline is content must not guarantee success or discuss sports wagering as a way of personal or financial success. Content must not imply greater chances of winning versus other sports wagering operators.
Thank you, sir. And was this document previously provided to the IAB and the commission in advance of ESPN Bet's launch in November of 2023?
Yes, prior to the ESPN Bet launch, the commission requested and Penn provided a number of policies pertaining to its relationship with ESPN. This specific policy is relevant to the matter at hand.
And did you learn if Mr. Davis had been subject to any training regarding prohibited content when discussing sports wagering prior to this incident?
Yes, he was. On October 30th, 2023. Mr. Davis and the entire ESPN college basketball team were given a presentation on best practices and frequently asked questions involving sports wagering.
And did you learn if there was a formal training or presentation involved this training?
We found that there was no formal training. The training that it's put on by ESPN personnel and uses just the policies they have, and then involves questions and answers.
Thank you. And in this investigation, did you inquire further from Mr. Soriano about the steps that Penn took prior to entering into the agreement with ESPN?
Yes.
And could you describe what Mr. Soriano reported as the process Penn engaged in prior to it entering into its sportsbook agreement with ESPN?
Sure. Attorney Soriano reported that they performed a due diligence as well as verifying ESPN for any issues that may present suitability issues for licensure. And then it ultimately reported to Penn's compliance committee that ESPN was unlikely to present any suitability issues.
And did Mr. Soriano explain any inquiries he and Penn made into ESPN regarding responsible gaming practices prior to the closing of that agreement?
Yes. They met with the ESPN responsible gaming team. Those meetings led to the development of Penn's policies regarding content and its relationship to ESPN, including the content policy reviewed earlier as in Exhibit 7. And they acknowledged that ESPN had familiarity with responsible gaming requirements due to past sports wagering relationships.
And did you learn about Mr. Soriano's present involvement with ESPN regarding those same responsible gaming initiatives?
Yes, Mr. Soriano said he meets bi-weekly with ESPN. Additionally, the Penn marketing team has regular discussions with ESPN regarding marketing strategies. And Mr. Soriano described the relationship as a collaborative one.
And related to that marketing, did you learn anything regarding Penn's current role in ESPN's marketing of ESPN Bet?
Yes, that Penn does not have a 24/7 monitoring presence for ESPN content. It relies on ESPN's internal monitoring, and that no programs are specifically designed to promote ESPN Bet.
And in the video of the incident that was depicted in Exhibit 1, Mr. Davis refers to Aaron Dolan, the other party that's present, who had provided the wagering picks, as being from ESPN Bet at the conclusion of the segment. Did you inquire as part of the investigation further into that categorization or that statement?
Yes, it was learned that Ms. Dolan is presented as an ESPN sports wagering analyst. That title was not what was in use prior to Penn's relationship, and that Ms. Dolan is an ESPN employee. Penn does not have input in the use of that title.
And similarly, to that end, did you inquire as to who Mr. Davis's employment agreement is with?
Yes, his employment is with ESPN Productions.
And with that, Mr. Davis is not an individual licensed by the commission. Is that correct?
Correct.
And did you discuss the Penn response to this incident with Mr. Soriano during this investigation?
Yes, we did.
And could you describe what you learned about the immediate response to Mr. Davis's statement, kind of in the moment?
Sure. Mr. Davis was approached right after the show, and ESPN producer addressed his statement with him right after the segment and explained that the term risk-free is not consistent with their guidelines, and that Mr. Soriano noted that shortly after he was notified of the incident, he reached out to discuss the matter with his contacts at ESPN.
Now, we were noted earlier that the Mr. Davis's X.com post was made shortly after the incident. Did you learn if Penn had any input into his making that statement?
Yes, they did not. The post was made shortly after the incident while Penn was still discussing the next steps. So it appeared he took it upon himself to post that. And
did Penn have any involvement in Mr. Davis's appearance and statement on the Pat McAfee show the following day, which we just watched as Exhibit 4?
No, Attorney Soriano reported that that was on Mr. Davis's own decision.
And was there any additional disciplinary or remedial measures taken by Penn beyond Mr. Davis's subsequent statements and his discussion with the ESPN producer in this incident?
No, not that we were made aware of.
And understanding that ESPN College Game Day is a nationally televised program, did the investigation inquire if any disciplinary action was taken in any other jurisdictions due to this incident?
Attorney Soriano said that he did notify other jurisdictions. However, no action was taken in any other jurisdiction.
And did Mr. Soriano report any additional information regarding Penn and ESPN's relationship specific to responsible gaming or responsible gaming messaging?
He indicated that Penn regularly updates its guidelines. He provided some initiatives undertaken by ESPN independent of its relationship with Penn, including some articles and guides on ESPN's website pertaining to responsible wagering and player education advertising campaigns.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. I have nothing further for Mr. Murphy at this point. I would turn it back to the chair.
Thank you, Councilor Mercer, Mr. Murphy. Mr. Soriano, any cross-examination?
No questions, Chair, other than to thank Councilor Mercer and Mr. Murphy for their presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Soriano. At this time, I will ask, do the commissioners have any questions for the witness, Mr. Murphy? All right. I will now ask Mr. Soriano to please call any witness he intends to call.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to formally call any witness. I'm here on behalf of Penn Sports Interactive, and my testimony, with the Chair's permission, will be a brief summary. At which point, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Well, first, I'd like to thank the Chair and the Commission, the IEB, for your attention to this matter today, and for the collaboration and reviewing it with us. As stated in the testimony from Mr. Murphy, the facts here are straightforward. Where March 24th, 2024, Mr. Davis made the statement that is the subject of this inquiry. Shortly thereafter that day, as we just heard, Mr. Davis posted on social media a further statement where he acknowledged that his statement was a joke, that risk-free investing does not exist, and he cautioned those who engage in gambling to do so with prudence, care, caution, fiscal and personal responsibility, and to never overextend. The statement as made was not consistent with our expectations, which is why prompt action was taken on it. It was not consistent with ESPN's expectations, which is why prompt action was taken. In addition to the follow-up statement and discussion, we regularly review processes and procedures and best practices in an effort to make sure that we are meeting the Commission's expectations and the expectations of our other regulators. In addition, we regularly review our responsible gaming messaging, engage with stakeholders in the responsible gaming space, focus on proactive communications, and our partners at ESPN share this commitment. We're very active in responsible gaming education as well. And that shared commitment led to the prompt action here. And when something falls short of our expectations, we promptly attend to it, discuss it with our regulators, and most importantly, learn from it and try to avoid any sort of repeat. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions the commission may have.
Thank you, Mr. Soriano. I have just something to start with. On Mr. McAfee's show, he said, and it caught my attention, I wrote it down. Regulators use these things against you. Does PSI think that regulators are using these things against you?
Commissioner, I can't speak for Chair. I won't speak on behalf of Mr. McAfee. Obviously, I'll speak on behalf of myself. I think the comment called attention to the importance of compliance. I think when the context, I think to think about there is understanding that in the regulated gaming space, that a violation, your statements that result in a violation, will be used against you in that context, in that it will be evidence of a potential non-compliance situation. So I think that's an important, I think it's actually an important concept. And I think I think those of us who do regulatory a lot, I think we all understand the regulated space and how it works. I think there's some mystery perhaps among the general public sometimes as to how heavily regulated the gaming industry is and what the expectations are. And so, that concept that the regulated industry is important and that regulators are watching, I think is one worth exploring. And so I think that's how I would interpret that context.
Okay. Thank you for that. Commissioner O'Brien, I see your mute button is off.
Thank you. So Attorney Soriano, you talked about, I think in the interview with IB earlier, that you don't have a 24/7 monitorship on the content of ESPN, right?
Yeah. Good morning, Commissioner O'Brien. Nice to see you.
Good morning.
Yes,
Yeah.
That is that's correct in terms of the amount of programming that's out there, all the networks, all of the there's not someone watching 24/7 on our end. Correct.
Right. So I remember the prior relationship that you had a rather robust team looking at social media output, that sort of thing, to ensure compliance. So can you describe for me in more detail what exactly you do to monitor the ESPN content? I know it's not 24/7, but can you be more specific about how you monitor for this?
Yeah, sure, Commissioner. With respect to social media, for example, there are certain accounts that are that Penn has either oversight of or insight into, and is always reviewing anything going out in the ESPN Bet universe on social. Similarly, we have our marketing team, our marketing compliance team internally, and ESPN has a robust team as well that's doing that. So that communication back and forth between the teams, I think, makes sure that we are monitoring what it is should be monitored. And I am always sensitive to anything that is particularly gaming related, regulated gaming related. So it's something that, again, I think it's a shared responsibility in that respect. And I think we certainly had perhaps a slightly different approach when we owned a prior media partner or had a partnership with a prior media partner. I think because of some of how we assess the compliance situation there and that discussion, I think it's again, it's not a 24/7, but it's a collaborative review, particularly on things like social media and when we think about gambling.
Okay. And can I just clarify, did you confirm that Mr. Davis did in fact attend that October 2023 training and complete it?
I understand that he did, Commissioner.
Okay. The last area of questions that I have for you, Attorney Soriano, have to do with exhibits. I think it's primarily Exhibit 7, which is the ESPN Bet content guidance from October 2023. I don't know if you have that in front of you. You may, in fact, know it off the top of your head. There's a couple references you make in there, and you supplemented an answer, which I believe is contained in Exhibit 8, which was an email back to Attorney Mercer in October of 24. And there were two sort of terms of art in there that caught my eye that I'm concerned with, and I just want you to expand upon. One is being content integration, and one is editorial integration into ESPN programming. And I think I've mentioned this before, that this is sort of an example of where do you draw the line between what's ESPN, what's ESPN Bet, and is there any level of potential confusion by the viewers? And so those are the two areas that I'm still concerned with. Can you give me examples of what you mean by content integration and editorial integration into ESPN programming?
Yeah, generally, and I'm reviewing the language, the precise language, Commissioner, at the same time as I'm answering the question. So
yeah, no, if you need a minute to look at it again, just let me know.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I have it. I have it fresh, and I'm just looking at it correctly. Yeah, I think, Commissioner, the concept of content integration and editorial integration, I think we see it a lot now, where obviously we're responsible, we're partners with ESPN, but I think you see it a lot in terms of just where the industry is, where media is, and when folks are talking about sports wagering. It's become a newsworthy topic. Obviously, I think it's hard to watch any sports related programming without some reference to something that's going on in sports wagering. You see it during the NCAA, during other events. And so, when we talk about content integration and editorial integration, it's thinking about how is, for example, things like odds provided by ESPN Bet. I think that would be one example, and you see lots of others have that. I think that's a content integration. That's an editorial integration. Odds provided by, and I think so. So I think that would be an important one to keep in mind if you want a specific example. But I think the concept generally is, when talking about, when providing editorial commentary on gaming, how's that coming? One flip side of this is, I think, the importance of, and it's certainly something that we take to heart, when you talk about editorial integration or content integration, explaining to media partners where they should get that information from, and more importantly, where they should not. Early on, I think in the sports wagering environment, you saw a lot of media companies, and this prior to my participation at Penn or work here, linking to whatever odds they could find, and oftentimes those were offshore illegal sports books. And so, that was an editorial integration or content integration that was not good for the industry or for anyone. And so, focusing on that as an example, I think is important. And I hope I've given you some more color on that. I'm happy to, if I haven't, I'm happy to discuss it more, obviously. But I think that's the thought pattern, is how does the concept of wagering integrate in? So
the concern that I have in terms of the document in your description is one of the concerns that I would have as a regulator is, with the launch of this partnership, there's a lot of talk about eliminating friction between sort of the ESPN experience and the betting experience, which I get from a business point of view, but that practically speaking, and I think RG speaking, there should be some level of friction and that there should be some level of separation. And so, sort of beyond today's conversation, I think I would like to have a continued conversation about what does that mean exactly in preserving the friction that I think is responsible. And one last question that I have for you. When you spoke to Ivy back in the summer, you said that you and your team were working on sort of a real-time response, like guidance on what do you do if, say, that happened again in the moment? What is the guidance to, ESPN Bet employees? Have you made any further advancements, anything to say in terms of today's hearing in that regard?
Yeah, Commissioner, my understanding, obviously, I've had those conversations. If I could back up to address your earlier comments, I would be happy to be a participant in that dialogue with you and the commission as to how this looks. You know, I always appreciate your and the commission's feedback, and so we'd be happy to continue that conversation. I'm not sure it's on today's hearing agenda, but I think it definitely makes sense. You know, it would be a great conversation to continue to have. We had discussions, and I know ESPN had discussions internally, you know, more along the lines of just understanding that, you know, I think it's very fact and circumstances based, Commissioner, and obviously we hope that something like this, you know, comment like this doesn't happen again. I think it's fact and circumstances based, but I think it's just a sensitivity to, you know, if you detect that a comment was made, you know, is there a way right on the spot to try to, you know, have remedial action instead of it being a few minutes later on X, to have it right on the spot. And again, I don't know that that's something you can say if X do Y, because it's a complicated, it's complicated, but sensitizing to that concept is, I know, something that was discussed and is ongoing.
Okay. And then lastly, more of a comment than a question too. Some of the follow-up on X and the other appearances were, you know, a point of saying, I'm not apologizing, I'm clarifying, which struck me as sort of I was disappointed with that tone, that there wasn't an acknowledgement that they could have crossed a line in terms of what you have put forward in terms of the guidance. But there was also a reference, I believe, in the McAfee follow-up where he says, Mr. Davis says, you know, any reasonable person would have known I was joking. And we've had this conversation before and define reasonable person. And so my concern also is there's the reasonable person who's familiar with betting and sports and the banter, and then there's the reasonable person outside the industry. And I think the standard should be the reasonable person who may not be sophisticated in the industry. And so I'm curious to hear your response to that definition of reasonable person in this context.
Yeah, again, Commissioner, it's hard for me to, I can give you my perspective on it, you know, in terms of my thought. And, you know, this whole concept now of, you know, who is the reasonable person and where is it around, I think is, you know, I think it is a conversation worth exploring. You know, certainly we did have this conversation at length in a prior hearing, and you know, I certainly understand the commission's perspective as to, you know, how we should be thinking about that, and you know, how operators in general should be thinking about that concept based on the prior adjudications and where the commissioner, you know, where the commission is on it, and I think it's something we'll continue to look at, continue to discuss.
Okay. Thank you. As always, I appreciate your candor, Attorney Sano. Thank you.
Likewise, Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Brien. Commissioner Broder, I see that you're.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will try to be brief. I'm going to start, Council, with a bit of an editorial comment, because I think that conversation you just had with Commissioner O'Brien is relevant from a broad-based perspective, but not in this case. I mean, one of the reasons we have regs, as you know, is to, in this case, make some bright line distinctions. We know we might have a debate about what a reasonable person might think in more vague cases, if you will. This one, in terms of the violation, is kind of a slam dunk, right? So we don't have to worry, I don't think, about what a reasonable person would think, and certainly disappointed with Mr. Reese's, you know, I don't want to say walking back, but trying to requalify, you know, sticking your flag. And no, it wasn't an apology. That's not particularly helpful, but I'm not sure if we need to talk too much about that. What I'm interested in is a little bit more about this. As Commissioner O'Brien talked about the nature of the relationship and the possibility of what controls are in place. There's kind of two flavors of problems that pop up. There is something that is kind of planned out beforehand that might be a bad act, and that means it slipped through some controls. And then there's, as what I think we have in this case, a guy who just pops off, right? I don't think he planned that out. I think he probably said that in the moment, thought he was being clever, and off you go. What interested me about it is what I heard in the testimony was there's an ESPN producer who flagged it immediately, who talked to Mr. Davis immediately after, and then that went up the chain. I think that is an excellent outcome. I think that it arguably is the best you can do in the circumstances of an unplanned comment that you don't know it till it happens. So is there a formal reporting structure where because the nice thing about ESPN content in terms of 24/7 monitoring is presumably there's always a producer, right? There's always that person who is monitoring the broadcast, maybe not an independent person, but is someone that, in this case, flagged it immediately. And that's great. But is that what is the nature of the relationship that allows you all to address that, based on your regulatory responsibilities?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. And I think you're right in that when something there's things you can't plan for. And we see it even in the casino space a lot. You train the slot attendant on exactly how to pay a jackpot, and they do it every day the same way for their entire career, and then one day they forget to run the self-exclusion check and make that mistake. And the question is, how do you fix that sort of one-off? And it's additional, is it additional training, is it additional discussion? In terms of our oversight, this is set up in such a way as to be collaborative, as to be, an understanding that, Penn is the licensed regulated sports book. It's our oversight. We have had many conversations and discussions and policy reviews around this. When, the nice thing about, like you said, about content is we see it. And so we can be sensitive to any issue that comes up and exercise those collaborative rights to have any sort of discussion about any compliance issue. And we regularly do, proactively. We have conversations about new initiatives. And is there any concern here? Is there any, anything we should be thinking about? What are the regulatory overlays here? So it's a very, very good partnership from a regulatory perspective. I think we have the controls in place that we need. We have the collaboration in place that we need. I think we saw what happened here, and I think that's what happened.
Do you think you need? I can't think of a nice way. Do you think you need a bigger stick or a more formal way of intervening? Because that Mr. Davis is almost, in certain respects, 2 steps removed, right? He has a relationship with ESPN overall, right? That he doesn't technically have a relationship with you all, which creates a little bit of a leverage issue. And then, he is, I suspect, we say he went on the McAfee show of his own volition. I suspect that ESPN has a little bit more influence over where he goes and what he can do in that sense. And I'm sure that, Pat McAfee's show is very popular. It is a very good thing for ESPN to have their personalities appear on the show. But to circle back to what I originally said, do you think you need a bigger, or more formal mechanism within your relationship with ESPN in order to control for situations like this?
I don't think so, Commissioner. I think we're happy with personally, I'm happy with how things are working. It's an active relationship. I think, if we got to a situation, and again, this happened and there was the discussion about it. I'm not aware that there's been any other issue with respect to this analyst. And so I'm comfortable with where we are. I think if I ever got to the point where I felt uncomfortable, I would have further conversations and discussions about that. And it would be, again, a collaborative effort of how do we do better if we need to.
You got it. Thank you very much, Councilor. I want to echo Commissioner O'Brien's praise for your candor in this matter and the forthright way you've been interacting with the commission about it. So, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner Broder. Any further questions for Mr. Soriano? I would also like to applaud you, Mr. Soriano, for your swift action that day and the day after, and your quick reporting to us. So I'll join in that. With that said, any further questions, Commissioners? I'll ask one more time. All right. Would the IEB like to make a closing statement?
Briefly, yes, thank you, Chair. I'll echo a lot of what the IB intends to close with, was addressed in the questions that we have. Once again, I'd like to thank the Commission for its time and consideration, Mr. Soriano and the Penn team for its cooperation throughout this matter. As stated in the IEB's opening, 205 CMR 256.01 establishes the responsibility that Penn has here, and then 205 CMR 256.041 addresses unfair or deceptive advertising, marketing, or branding for sports wagering. And then, as stated earlier, 205 CMR 256.046C and D both directly address risk-free or cost-free language, risk-free being relevant here. As the IAB has persisted throughout this argument or through today's hearing, our aim was twofold: to highlight the specific incident of non-compliance and establish that it was in fact a violation of these regulations, which I believe through the admission of the operator and from what we've seen today here is clear. And two, to provide additional information to assist the Commission in deciding potential discipline or remediation on this matter. And I hope that the documents, the testimony that was provided to the Commission throughout this process, both today and prior, is helpful in accomplishing that goal. But I thank everybody for their time.
Thank you, Councilor Mercer. Mr. Soriano, anything to close with?
Very briefly, Chair, again, I'd like to thank the Chair and Commissioners for the opportunity today and for your time and for the back and forth and the questions. Also, again, I'd like to thank Councilor Mercer and Mr. Murphy for their professionalism, their thoroughness, their collaboration in this matter. And I would request that the Commission consider our response to the matter, the controls that are in place, the prompt response and our history of compliance in reviewing this matter. And with that, I have nothing further.
Thank you, Mr. Soriano. I was always taught that an attorney who represents himself has a fool for a client, but I don't think that was true today.
I'll stop there, Chair. Thank you.
Unless there are any further matters that PSI or my fellow commissioners would like to address, we will now conclude this portion of the proceeding. Does anyone have anything further?
Nothing from PSI, Chair.
Thank you. The Commission will deliberate about this matter in private and issue a written decision. The proceeding at this point, however, remains open. If at any point during deliberations, the Commission determines that further testimonial or documentary evidence is desirable, it may send notice of such and provide instructions on how to proceed. With that, we are now adjourned. Commissioners, we are staying on this and will be moved over. We don't have to go into a separate one.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Soriano.